Welcome to Bed Crime Stories podcast. I'm your host, T. I'm here with Mélange. She says hi. Today we're going to talk a little more about the Sebastian Rogers case. Please do me a favor, like, share, subscribe, leave me a comment. I love hearing what you guys have to say. And if you want to support the channel, you can do so with a membership or a super chat. Hitting the like button helps so much. Subscribing really helps a lot too. With all that out of the way, let's dig in. When a child vanishes from their home, when all the doors are said to be locked, and there are no signs of a break-in or a break-out, of course we true crime sleuths are going to look at whoever lives in that same house. Occam's razor tells us that Sebastian Rogers of Hendersonville, Tennessee, did not wander away barefoot in the dark, chilly early morning hours of Monday, February 26, 2024, without a coat, without his phone, without food and water, without his beloved switch from his mother and his stepfather's home, Katie and Chris Proudfoot. Sebastian leaving like that is not the simplest explanation for his disappearance, because Chris and Katie told us Sebastian is not an eloper. Chris said that Sebastian is not a child who wanders. Sebastian's father, Seth Rogers, added that Sebastian never goes outside barefoot and he doesn't like to be cold. Listen to what Seth said about Sebastian on his recent live show.
I miss him taking a shower until there's no more hot water. The bathroom is so steamed up, and then all of a sudden the water stops, and I'm like, well, how long is he going to be in the bathroom? I only have one bathroom. So, one bathroom, you need to hurry up, because if I got to use the bathroom, you need to hurry up. And walking in, and he's literally curled up on the floor. The bathroom is all steamed up. He's laying on a towel, and he's covered up with another towel, and he's just sitting there. And I'm like, what are you doing? And he was like, it's warm in here.
Some of us true crime creators and followers believe that the answers to Sebastian's disappearance lie in the mysterious activities that were clearly taking place starting around 3:10 a.m. on that Monday in February outside the Proudfoot home, as evidenced by a neighbor's security camera footage. That neighbor's camera was pointing toward the back of Sebastian's home in what's been called a common area. In the video, you see subject 1 with a light source in the lower right-hand corner. That is presumed to be a person holding a flashlight. Then you see subject 2 briefly appear and move before that light source is covered or obscured by bushes. Subject 1 a few seconds later then moves out of the frame. Then subject 2 reappears and follows subject 1 off the screen. Then, a short time later, you see one of the subjects moving quickly back through that common area, and many of us speculate that could have been someone running back toward the Proudfoot home. I say possibly because we can't see where that person ultimately ended up. According to reporter Nick Barris, who first shared this footage, investigators told him that the mere fact that someone was there outside Sebastian's house is significant. Barris described the activity outside the residence as suspicious. We also know that there is security camera footage of a mysterious car that turns up in the neighborhood on Kellen Lane, drives closer to Stafford Court, turns its lights off at one point, and sits for approximately 3 to 5 minutes. The car presumably drives off into the night, and by the next morning, Sebastian's bed is found empty by his mother, Katie. Katie and Chris Proudfoot have dismissed all this activity and tried to say that those lights belong to garbage trucks. However, we also know that the garbage trucks did not show up until around 5 a.m. Now, at the time of Sebastian's disappearance, Chris Proudfoot was engaged in a child custody battle with his fourth wife, Nina Gomez, over their young daughter, Faith. Chris Proudfoot allegedly had, or has, anger management issues. At least he did when he was with Nina Gomez, her 2 children from her previous marriage, and their shared daughter, Faith. And we know that Chris also had issues when dealing with Sebastian. Chris has admitted to using a belt on Sebastian at least twice. Should a man required to take anger management courses in New Mexico because of a custody case be using a belt on a child? Probably not. Was Chris able to control how hard he used the belt, or how many hits with the belt were doled out on Sebastian? I wonder. In trying to find out what exactly is taught in these courses, I came upon the website called highconflicttraining.com. They specialize in these types of classes, and on this website, it describes high conflict people as having predictable patterns, and they call people with high conflict personalities HCPs. It also said that people with high conflict personalities can make your life miserable. Nina Gomez certainly described many miserable experiences she had when she was married to Chris Proudfoot. I believe Chris Proudfoot is the person in that relationship who has a high conflict personality. The website describes HCPs like this. High conflict people have a pattern of high conflict behavior that increases conflict rather than reducing or resolving it. This pattern usually happens over and over again in many different situations with many different people. The issue that seems in conflict at the time is not what is increasing the conflict. The issue is the high conflict personality and how the person approaches problem solving. With HCPs, again, high conflict personalities, the pattern of behavior includes a lot of 1. Blaming others, 2. All or nothing thinking, 3. Unmanaged emotions, and 4. Extreme behaviors. That's the one that scares me. Poor Sebastian, who is on the autism spectrum and who also has chromosomal deletion syndrome, had to deal with his stepfather, Chris Proudfoot, inside that house on Stafford Court. We know that Chris wanted Sebastian out of the house. Chris and Katie allegedly told Seth Rogers they were looking at homes for troubled boys. We know that Child Protective Services had been sent out to the Proudfoot home on multiple occasions, some of those for Chris Proudfoot reportedly, and possibly at least one for Katie allegedly. Chris even joked recently that when a CPS worker showed up at his house, that he already knew her, he recognized her from a previous visit. We've also heard for ourselves how Chris Proudfoot demeans Sebastian when he talks about Sebastian.
At school, he's known for peeing in his pants. I mean, it's a number of things. He's very awkward, but he's quirky. He's a good kid. But he doesn't have friends.
You know who probably really doesn't have friends? Mr. Chris, the a-hole. Who would want to kick back and willingly listen to this blowhard? Shots of tequila would be needed, in my opinion. So can you imagine Sebastian trying to tiptoe around his stepfather, a man that the court in New Mexico clearly believed needed anger management classes to learn about his alleged high conflict personality? That house on Stafford Court was a ticking time bomb. I read that people with a high conflict personality usually aren't the type to reflect on their own behaviors, and they have a very hard time changing, even if they take a class or two. The website said that HCPs stand out in a crowd because of the intensity of their blame for others, especially those close to them or in authority positions over them. Maybe that's why Chris Proudfoot works on a crane. He sits inside the machine all by himself. For these HCPs, it is highly personal, and it feels like they might survive when things don't go their way. So they focus on attacking and blaming somebody else and find fault with everything that person does, even though it may be quite minor or non-existent compared to the high conflict behavior of the HCP. I can't help thinking about how Chris described punishing Sebastian when he failed to clean his room up to Chris's standards. Remember, Chris said he grabbed anything that wasn't in its place, everything that was on the floor, and he threw all of it in a garbage bag and then threw it out. Listen to this short segment from the Web Sleuth show that Chris turned up on. Even in just a few sentences, you can tell what Chris is like when he's pissed off.
My family owns a cemetery. We own a funeral home. Like, where in the hell do you get up with this stuff?
Okay.
Not you. I'm saying the public.
And so that, Chris, that's why it is great that you're here.
Trisha of Web Sleuth really handled him very patiently. She knew how to talk to him, something he doesn't know how to do. The website about HCPs goes on to say that an HCP, in contrast to their blame of others, can see no fault in themselves and see themselves as free of all responsibility for the problem. So whatever was going wrong inside the Proudfoot home with Sebastian, for example, the bedwetting, was possibly something that Chris blamed fully on Sebastian. Chris likely did not self-reflect and say to himself, what am I doing that is causing this child to be anxious, afraid, scared? And what can I do as his stepfather to help him stop feeling that way? Per the website, HCPs also tend to blame strangers because it's easy. On the internet, they're anonymous and they make the most extreme statements. Basically, they're freaking trolls. HCPs tend to see conflicts in terms of one simple solution rather than taking time to analyze the situation, hear different points of view, and consider several possible solutions. Again, I wonder if Chris ever sat down with Sebastian and had a quiet, patient conversation, allowing Sebastian to freely share his feelings, his frustrations, maybe his complaints about Chris. According to this website, for HCPs, compromise and flexibility seem impossible, as though they could not survive if things did not turn out absolutely their way. They often predict extreme outcomes, if other people do not handle things the way they want them to. Think about that. They often predict extreme outcomes if others do not handle things the way they want them to. Is this where Chris allegedly said to Katie, look, it's either me or your kid. Either you get him out of this house or we're getting divorced? Allegedly. The website said that even if friends disagree on a minor issue, the HCP may end the friendship on the spot. This is their all or nothing solution. You either do this or I'm out of here. HCPs also tend to become very emotional about their points of view and often catch everybody by surprise with their intense fear, anger, yelling, or disrespect for those nearby. I think we heard that on the Web Sleuth show. Their behavior often shocks everybody. They often seem unable to control their own emotions, but there are also HCPs who use emotional manipulation to hurt others, and these HCPs often seem clueless about their devastating and exhausting emotional impact on other people. How was a 15-year-old child with autism and chromosomal deletion syndrome supposed to know how to navigate around Chris Proudfoot, especially if he really does have a high conflict personality? It's like sending a little kid into battle without a weapon and without an understanding of their adult opponent who does have a weapon. There's no way Sebastian could win. The website also said that HCPs frequently engage in extreme behavior. This may include shoving or hitting or keeping track of another person's every move. Many of their extreme behaviors are related to losing control over their emotions, such as suddenly throwing things and making mean statements. This is so scary. Remember, Sebastian is smaller than Chris by a long shot, and he also has a delicate, vulnerable area on his skull as a result of the chromosomal deletion syndrome. That area needs to be protected from fists, if you know what I mean. And one way to render Sebastian unconscious or worse would be striking that area really hard. And of course, I can't help thinking about the thud Katie described hearing around 10 p.m. on the night before she reported Sebastian missing. Could that have been Sebastian falling to the floor? I'm wondering. No one has been charged with any crimes in connection to Sebastian's disappearance, and of course, law enforcement keeps saying there's no signs of foul play. But of course, they can lie to us, and I have to wonder if a person has a high conflict personality, and if that person gets really mad, is it possible that his anger could be vented on a vulnerable child, a boy who was known to wet the bed when staying at the stepfather's house? We heard that Chris wasn't happy about the stench of urine and the smell of poop in the home. Could that have spawned angry confrontations? We've been told Chris was in Memphis working when Sebastian went poof. But we know that there are some hours of the day when it's likely nobody had eyes on Chris. It would not have been impossible for him to drive to Hendersonville and then back to Memphis before the police were called and before his work commenced. Other behaviors of those with an HCP are related to an intense drive to control or dominate those closest to them, such as threatening extreme action if you don't agree, or using DV. We have seen Chris in the early interviews taking control of the narrative, doing most of the talking, and Katie being quite compliant. Again, poor Sebastian. Unless Katie was protecting him, and it doesn't seem like she was, Sebastian was at the mercy of Chris Proudfoot, a guy who I suspect has a high conflict personality. I am not a psychologist. This is just my opinion. But again, we heard Chris on that show tearing into people. Does that sound like somebody who can control his anger?
I had looked through the house for him because it was typical for him to get up and come and rummage for snacks and things like that. And he likes to dip behind the, walls and watch, and then he comes out after I come back and he likes to scare me. But, after I looked, and I mean, mind you, all of this took place in like 1 minute flat, but I didn't see him in his room. I looked all over. I ran through the whole house. I looked out all the doors and windows, and I was like hollering his name. And I picked up the phone and I called my husband and I said, I can't find him. And he said, what do you mean? I said, he's not in this effing house. I can't find our son. And I jumped in my car and I drove around the neighborhood and I drove over by the school, and he's already at this point I was like hysterical and I was crying and I was screaming, and he was like three-wayed law enforcement.
Let me know what you think in the comments, and I will see you guys next time on Bed Crime Stories. Please smash the like button and hit that little subscribe button too. Thank you.